In the equation, cardiac output, or Q, is determined by heart rate and stroke volume. Heart rate is controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, or PNS and SNS. The PNS incorporates the vagal nerve, which suppresses the SA node to give a rest or a break on the heart. The SNS incorporates the accelerated nerve and the hormones epinephrine and norepinephrine. During exercise, these hormones increase heart rate, ventilation, blood flow, contractility, glucose, and lipolysis. They cause vasodilation or vasoconstriction, which we can see here. During exercise, blood vessels vasodilate to control oxygen delivery. During exercise, muscles are at a greater need of oxygen. To regulate blood flow and oxygen demand, vasoconstriction occurs to the non-essential organs and tissues. For example, if you're doing a back squat, the legs are vasodilated, whereas the muscles in the upper extremity are going to be more vasoconstricted. Now, moving on, to understand the stroke volume, we must talk about the cardiac cycle first. When the SA node fires, atrial depolarization occurs and the atria will contract. We can see this in the P wave. The signal is sent to the AV node, and ventricular depolarization and atrial repolarization occurs, making the ventricules contract, pushing out the blood of the heart, which we can see in this middle heart right here. The T wave represents ventricular repolarization. Here the chambers relax and the blood fills the heart. Moving on to stroke volume. Stroke volume is affected by preload, contractility, and afterload. It is essentially the amount of blood that is pushed out of the left ventricle per contraction. Preload is how much blood the heart can fill into the ventricle. Therefore, the greater the stretch, the greater the squeeze, which is also known as the Frank-Starling mechanism. The more blood that is present in the ventricle before a contraction, the more blood there is to reach the tissues during exercise. Therefore, when you increase the preload, you will increase the stroke volume. For contractility, it is essentially the strength of the contraction. Epinephrine and norepinephrine increase contractility. It also increases the sensitivity of calcium, which is necessary for the muscle contraction during exercise. As for afterload, this is also known as back pressure. It is essentially the amount of pressure pushing up against the aortic valve. Afterload is regulated with dilation and controls the resistance of flow. If there is an increase in afterload, there is a decrease in stroke volume. Altogether, to increase cardiac output, you are going to increase the heart rate or stroke volume.